Okay, welcome to the Coerver Coaching Podcast. I'm Mike Smith, Network Director for Coerver Coaching, and we're here at the headquarters of Coerver Coaching Netherlands with Director Rainel Woerdings. Rainel, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the setup. Thank you for your hospitality, as always. And so we're delighted to be in Amsterdam. Holland, of course, being the birthplace of Coerver, the initial inspiration behind Coerver Coaching method, and here with Alf Galustian, who, along with Chelsea great Charlie Cook, founded Coerver Coaching in 1984. And our special guest, Han Berger. Han is one of the longest serving and respected members of the Dutch football community. And Han, there's too much to remember in your bio, so I'm going to read it. Youngest ever coach in the first league with Utrecht at the age of 25. 637 games as a professional coach. Holland technical youth director, national youth team coach, Olympic team coach, coach in the Japanese J League, technical director now with the top team Sydney FC in Australia, technical director with the Australian Football Association, and now football director for the board of the KNVB, the Royal Dutch Football Association. I will stop there. There's probably more, but really great to have you with us. And
thank you.
We couldn't think of anybody more qualified to talk about the impact and the history of Dutch football and its impact on the world, and rolling back to total football. And I think that's where we're going to start. Roll back 30, 40 years to that revolution that was total football. And Alf, I'll turn it over to you. And to Han.
Well, first of all, it's always a pleasure. Han's my dear friend, and we'll talk as this goes on. We work together in Australia, and we keep in touch. So, Mike, you're absolutely right. Holland is very special for me and all the Coerver guys, because we got our inspiration from Will Coerver all those years ago, 40 plus years. In fact, this is our 40th year. So I suppose, and be interesting to see what Han thinks about this. If I look back these 40 years, everything that I say, teach, is based on three things. One is my experience, maybe the only good thing about getting older. The other thing is that experience gives me an opinion, and then that gives me a belief, and therefore I can teach. Although Dutch football, especially Will Coerver, was a huge influence on me, things evolved, things changed, and one of the interesting things, especially interesting things, was Han was the beginning of that great contribution that I think Holland have made to football, and certainly influenced me a huge amount. And let's call it total football for one. The first question, Han, is a lot of people ask me, well, what's the definition of total football? Back then, what was it? Now it's open to interpretation.
Yeah, I think the big change back then was that total football meant that players were no longer bound to a position. Mm-hmm. You know, basically every player had to be able to defend as well as attack. Mm. So you could suddenly you saw the fullbacks, the wingbacks as wingers. Mm. You mentioned Cruyff already a couple of times. Mm. He started as the number 9, the center forward, but he played everywhere on the pitch. Mm. It was still the era of man marking, so he took his marker into his own half and start the build-up and change positions with the center back. So then the man marker didn't know what to do. Mm. The space that came about when he took a man marker away, suddenly a midfielder was playing center forward. Mm. So the whole formation thing became fluid.
Yes.
And that was one big part of total football. The other thing was when the full press Maybe you remember the 1974 World Cup.
Yes, I remember it.
Rainel is nodding, but he wasn't even born then. As soon as the Dutch team lost the ball, like a wolf pack, they attacked the man in possession.
Yeah.
Now, all of these things are still happening in top football, but their origin is basically from total football.
Yes.
Cruyff, 1974 World Cup,
Yes.
Rinus Michels,
Yes.
not to forget.
Yes.
And there are some top coaches that have taken all of these principles to another level and translated that and are translating it into the modern way of playing. And I think the best example of that is probably Pep Guardiola,
Yes. Yeah.
who was heavily involved by Cruyff, who played under him.
Yes.
But many other coaches as well.
So my personal opinion is that there was a revolution. I mean, I think football, going back to the Brazilians and Hungarians, and the guys don't remember when we were kids, Pele and these wonderful players, it goes through cycles. But for me, with both professional coaches, I think something influences you, and it was so ironic that we met Will Coerver, who was Dutch, and if I go back these 40 years, as I remember it, Rinus Michels and Cruyff had this concept, as you say, fluid football, no positions, you're attacker or defender. Cruyff especially, his belief that every player, including the goalkeeper, even back then, he wanted the goalkeeper to be able to receive and pass the ball. So this idea that every player should have a good skill set, I mean, his technical skills, and we've talked about the 74, and Rinus Michels then, with this aggressive pressing that you're talking about, from my recollection, was very much not a fitness coach, believed in fitness. Double training, longer training, so the players could play this way, the way you've described. When I first met Will Coerver, who was obviously Dutch, so Rinus Michels and Cruyff, I think it was Cruyff, had approached Will, and to Cruyff's rather than Rinus Michels, although Will and Rinus Michels were friends in the early days, Cruyff wanted a curriculum for players to be developed so they had the same skill sets. I mean, talking about 40 years ago. And that's why Will went to Ajax to consult with Michael and with Rinus Michels and Johan Cruyff. We'll talk about what happened after that, but where Will Coerver fitted in to the total football was trying to find a curriculum to develop one part of that skill set. But it was also interesting when I first met you that you told me that your son was actually one of the first boys that were part of the whole Will Coerver.
We'll get back to that, how Will fitted in with the Dutch philosophy, because he certainly did. But that story, at one point in my career, I was coaching Fortuna Sittard. I have to get back one step earlier, because when I was coaching FC Utrecht, I also invited Will. And he was at my club for 2 or 3 days. And I just, I told my players, Will Coerver is coming. They all knew him. And he's going to take over some of our training sessions. So he was with us for a couple of days. The boys loved it. He stayed over at my house. My wife said, anything is good, you know that, but I don't want this man in my house anymore, because he drove her crazy. But so he went to Ajax as well. And the whole total football principle, if you want all your players to be able to play every position, then every player has to be skillful, right? And the strength of Ajax and the Dutch national team at that time was that they could all play. Rinus Michels for the 1974 World Cup, he put Arie Haan as a central defender. He was a creative midfield player, but his idea was, I need someone who can play from the back. If Cruyff drops back in the defense line, and he has to go into the midfield, he has to be able to...
Didn't Cruyff ask for the goalkeeper? I can't remember the goalkeeper's name, but was that in those days?
The first choice was actually Jan van Beveren
Right.
from PSV. And somehow the connection between the PSV Eindhoven players and Ajax players wasn't great. And Ajax was very influential. So, but probably Jan van Beveren, who later went to the USA, was defensively the best goalkeeper, maybe at that time worldwide.
Yeah.
But Cruyff wanted Jan Jongbloed, who was a very average goalkeeper, as if you talk about stopping balls, etc. But he could play with his feet.
Yeah.
So Cruyff lobbied for Jan Jongbloed, and Jan Jongbloed became the national team goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Because of that, he took that philosophy into the extreme.
Yeah.
Still now, I talk quite often with Ronald Koeman, who is the national team coach. Yeah. He told me that at one stage at Barcelona, when he played under Cruyff at Barcelona, Cruyff had the idea of dropping the goalkeeper and substituting him for an extra outfield player, because he so believed in, if you dominate possession, the opponent can't get dangerous anyhow.
Yeah.
And then the guys like Guardiola and Koeman, they had to talk him out of this, because he really wanted to take out the goalkeeper and play with 12 outfield players.
And isn't it incredible that now, even with kids, playing from the back is given, you know? I mean, we're going to talk about what we think about the future game later, but the influence the Dutch have had, certainly on global football, and you know, you can say that Cruyff was the godfather of this approach.
Yeah.
I think where Will fitted in was that Cruyff had a philosophy, but you still need a curriculum. You still need a body of work, and I think Rinus Michels and Cruyff felt that Will could in those days bring in that curriculum. Yeah. But I think fast forward then to what Coerver coaching is now, and things have changed. And I think any system, any curriculum, any method has to evolve in the future. So I think we have.
Yeah, it has to be
relevant.
I think you are very you're spot on. Any philosophy or curriculum, it has to be a living something, you know, because everything changes and everything develops and envelops. So it's not like here it is and it's still the same in 50 years' time, right?
Yeah, and I think
and we had lots of discussions about that.
Absolutely, I think one of the things misunderstanding. So we both have been in Japan. We love Japanese culture, and we can talk about that later. But it certainly influenced me, and I know it's influenced you. And one of the sayings in Japanese culture or explanation is this word misunderstanding. And when I first went in Japan, this was often a very frequent thing that happened. So Japanese would always ask you to explain. So how it influenced me was that you had to define what you said. If you talked about, say, counterattacking, what does it mean? I know what it means for me, but you can't assume. And when I went to Japan, it just taught me anything you say in our profession in football. If you say fast break attack, if you say counter pressing, what does it mean? So one of the misunderstandings I think about Coerver coach, especially in Holland, and this is no criticism of Holland or Dutch coaches, but I think there has been a misunderstanding about Coerver coaching, brought a lot by Will himself in the early days, that ball mastery, which is control and comfort with the ball, and 1v1 was an end. That was it. And I know from discussions with Will and in the early days, the falling out with Rinus Michels and Cruyff, it was other things, personal things, but this idea that ball mastery and 1v1 was the end. And actually, when I first met you, I think you had that. We'll talk about how I had to try to persuade you that we'd evolved because, of course, it's a team game, and I had to make that case. So one of the misunderstandings, Han, I think, and I think it's still in some countries that I go to, was that ball mastery and 1v1 was an end to itself. And the truth is that it's a means to an end. The end is the game. So it's a means to the end, which is the game. And in podcasts like that, I've had with Arsene Wenger and Roy Hodgson and my dear friend Gerard Houlier's passed and other people, great coaches like you, it gives me an opportunity, and we had this conversation in Australia to discuss this and clear this misunderstanding. And it fits into very well how you describe what total football was, so that players had to have good skill sets to play the game well. An aggressive, attacking game, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was an attacking game.
Yeah,
and
extremely attacking.
Yes, and this, this war between do you give up possession and park the bus, which is valid. I personally don't like it, but it's absolutely valid. And attacking. I don't know. I believe in attacking football. I mean, I don't want to sound like it's just again my personal opinion is for the player. Isn't it nicer to attack? Not nicer. Aren't you more happy when you're passing the ball, when you're scoring goals, when you're involved with the ball? And it just makes rather than a tactical thing, a pleasure thing.
No, but you're spot on. I think everyone started playing as a kid to run with the ball and to score goals and to take on opponents, and and very often later on when you get to a higher level, a lot of that is taken away from you because you have to fit into the tactical discipline, right? But I just forgot to answer you one question. My son, Will Coerver, had these, that also leads into the whole Coerver, Rinus Michels discussion. Yes. I was coaching a team in the south of Holland, Fortuna Sittard, and Will lived close by.
Yes. Maastricht.
And that was before he visited me at Utrecht. Then he selected about 15 or 20 kids in that region as a demonstration group. Yes. And he traveled around to the German FA, in Belgium, everywhere. So at one point, my youngest son was part of that group. So he took him everywhere. But it became a kind of a circus act. So you have 15 or 20 boys who could do everything with the ball. And he would put on a demonstration where 15 boys at the same moment made the same move. And it was like synchronized.
Choreographed.
It was unbelievable,
dancing, wasn't it? Like
right.
Yeah.
And all these kids, they, if you talk about ball mastery, they could do anything with the ball. It was mind-blowing, right? Then that led into a discussion that that was okay, and everybody needed to be skillful to, in the end, reach top level. But it wasn't functional, right?
And there was a split, you were telling me.
Rinus Michels said that this is a circus act,
Right.
because actually they were good friends.
Yes. Oh, I
Will
know.
and Rinus.
From
They
Mrs.
did the pro license course together.
Yeah.
But that led to a fallout.
Yeah.
Because in the meantime, Michels was the national coach of Holland and the technical director of the Dutch Federation. And there they had the so-called Zeister view. Zeist is where the national headquarters of the Dutch FA is. And Michels said, to really learn to play football properly, you have to leave it in the total context. Football is an open skill. That means that every situation is different from the previous one. Golf, for example, is a close skill. So that you can practice a zillion times, that move, because the situation is always the same. The ball is lying there, you can take your position. An open skill, like almost every team sport, those situations are different. There is a million ways to control a ball. That depends on the speed of the ball, on your position, or your teammate's position, or the opponent's position.
Space.
Is there a lot of space? You know, so, and it's impossible to train all those options separately. So it's always about also with training, practicing the basic skills in a game, a real experience.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And there's where they clashed.
Yes.
Michels was convinced of this.
Yes.
Will said, there's no way to practice any football situation if you can't control the ball.
Yeah.
And to be honest, if you didn't agree with Will, then it became a bit difficult.
But there was a split in Holland, wasn't there?
Yes.
You had, I remember when
two factions, mate.
Two factions, yes.
Two factions.
It was ugly.
Really ugly.
And that's when I first came into meeting Will.
Where did you meet Will?
Okay, so this...
tell us about that.
I'll tell you about that. And it changed my life. I have to say, you know, I was a player and then went into coaching and had the ideas that my experience had given me. It was in Philadelphia in 83, I think, 83, 84. So Charlie and I were at one of these in America, they have these fantastic conventions. You know, they're like a trade show. Yeah. And so Charlie Cook and myself, we were walking around, and this little room, and there's this oldish guy, then I say oldish guy, with about 7 kids, each with a ball. There's only about 10 people in the room. And so Charlie said, let's go in here. And we sat down. And they were doing, you know, moves and ball mastery, and Will was shouting at them, you know, and so it ended, and Charlie, before, through a friend in St. Louis, had heard about a video series that Will had done in the really early days, and so we'd heard of the name, but there was this guy, and so. I think I went up to him afterwards and said, look, this is really interesting. I mean, two things interested Charlie and me that Will said in those days. One was that in the formative ages, later I wanted to know what those were. He thought they were between 8 and 12. He's not wrong. In the formative ages, when you... The priority is individual development, not team development. And the other thing was that everybody had a ball. I mean, we in our playing days and when in training, sometimes you didn't have a ball. I mean, it was like every kid had a ball. Anyway, I know it sounds sort of corny now. And so what happened was that he didn't really want to talk to us. So, you know, who are you guys? And then just coincidentally, I went to do my in England we had full. It's not the pro license, but it was like the old pro license. And I went. It's a 3-week course at Lilleshall in England, which was our national headquarters. And Bobby Robson was coach of the national team. Bobby brought Will Coerver there. And my first day, I said, Will Coerver's here. So I made a point to sit next to him at breakfast every day. Now, he was a difficult man socially. You know, he really was so focused on what he believed that socially it was very difficult to get close to him. But I stuck it out every day with breakfast, and he knew that I had interest. Just asking him questions, and watching the sessions with England under 16, good sessions, the intense sessions, both physically and technically. And so I haven't seen drills like that. And so I called Charlie in those days, and I said, Charlie and I both married Americans. We wanted to open a football school or expand our football school. So Charlie, look, this is I haven't heard this before. Some of the things this guy's saying. Let's start our schools and call it Coerver. And so Will came to America. We arranged everything. 2 weeks with him, 2 very difficult weeks, and. So Charlie and I won't tell you what the difficulties were, but they weren't of a football nature. They were of a personality nature. It was difficult. And so Charlie and I said, look, we don't think we can work with him very easily. So I said to Will, I think it was my idea, I said, look, can we pay you and take the rights for your name? What could I say? We don't want you in the business. I just had to say. And luckily, he was going to Dubai the next year, so we did. And for 15, 20 years, I used to come to Holland every month when I could. Walk to Will's house in the snow. Mm-hmm. He used to play me the same tapes. And I listened, and I listened, and I listened, because I felt that we were going to create a brand. We couldn't fall out with the name of the person. We had to be respectful. But one of the misconceptions was that Will was involved in Coerver coaching. He wasn't. In '84, we bought the rights, and Charlie and I started Coerver coaching. And one of the things that Charlie to me was one of the greatest 1v1 players ever, as good as George Best, in my opinion. And so Charlie and I felt we've got to get to exactly what Han's saying. We've got to connect isolated practice to the team game, and we've got to have a way of explaining that. Why is isolated practice important to the team game? And we had to make a link, and then once you make the link, you've got to make a curriculum. And it took us 40 years to do that. But that misconception that Will was involved with Coerver coaching is a wrong. He wasn't.
And now then, so after you created Coerver coaching with the global rights for that, so really you and Charlie took that all over the world. 50, 60 countries working with top federations.
Now
some of the biggest clubs in the world.
Yes.
Over the last 40 years. So one of those countries was Australia. Yeah. And so where Han was working. So talk about the first time you met and what took you to Australia.
Well, so I first went to Australia, I think in the late 90s. I was invited by the New South Wales Soccer Federation to do a clinic. And there I met a really great coach, Kelly Cross, an English guy, but living in Australia, and Kelly was working for the Federation. And so I got to know Kelly, and I kept going back to Australia just to do a 1-week clinic. And some years later, Kelly said, look, my boss is Han Berger, technical director of the Australia Federation. He's Dutch. I think that you should meet. So it was Kelly who arranged that. And Kelly gave me some back. Kelly and I were good friends. He said, "Well, look, he's a bit skeptical about the curve. I've got to tell you, hands, and I knew, but before, of course, he's so charming. We went to, I think, some ground or a school, and I had 15 boys, and I had 3 hours to prove to Han the Coerver had changed. And then, I tried to make that link that ball mastery improves first touch, receiving, etc. And then if you can pass and receive, so ball mastery, isolated practice was just an end. It wasn't an end itself. It was a means to create that skill that gave you more time and space. And when you've got more time and space, you've got to make better decisions. So it affects the decision making. Anyway, I basically had 3 hours, and Han was very politely sitting watching the thing. And then we went to coffee, and then we started. I think he. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but he said, "Look, I see you've." Coerver coaching's changed. I mean, I think that's what happened.
I think that's a very good summary. And yes, that was a story. I was appointed technical director of the Australian FA in 2009. And one of the big, or maybe the biggest assignment was to create a curriculum, a football development plan. Right, from scratch, because Australia is a very complicated country because of its size, and because of it's a federation. So you have the national federation, but you also have 9 state federations, who all had their own ideas, their own technical directors, their own coaches, and with totally different ideas. And I had to sort of pull that together. So we had to build a curriculum. And one of the things was Kelly came up to me. He knew you, obviously. He spoke very highly of you. But I was a bit superstitious because of my Dutch background. Yeah. And knowing the whole controversy between the Coerver method and the Rinus Michels Zeister vision. And to be honest, I was a little bit more on the Zeister vision side of things. But anyway, it went exactly as you just described it. So I still had a vision of isolated exercises. And I had seen fantastic kids with wheel in this demonstration group. But when they were put in a game situation and suddenly there was not so much space, and suddenly there was an opponent and you were under pressure, then all those isolated skills didn't really help them. So that was a big question for me, and you, Alf, you showed and you convinced me that Coerver coaching had developed, and it was much more game related. And to be honest, you know how the Australian curriculum, how we build it.
Yes.
This part about the skill acquisition phase from about age 8 till about 12-ish, before they go into the growing spurt. It's all about the 4 core skills. And, teaching the 4 core skills, but with as much game-related resistance
and decision-making too. Adding decision making to. I think that was the one thing which, being self-critical of myself and when Charlie and I would trying to build the Coerver curriculum, how that evolved was that with isolated practice, the coach tells you what to do. There isn't decision making, and football's a game of decision making with and without the ball. But I'm interested with the ball, right? And so that decision-making DNA of the practice wasn't there, and that's what I think. When I made the presentation to Han, I made sure that if I was teaching a skill, for example, receiving first touch, which creates time and space, there was some decision-making. Decision-making can only happen if there's somebody coming from the right, left, you have to have these natural, let's call them natural, full pressure opposition. And so we had a coffee, etc. And that started 3-year involvement with Han, where it was a fantastic idea, and I wish more countries did this. So Han had this idea of bringing ex-international players, right? I mean, these guys have played 50, 100 times for the national team.
Yeah.
And I think there was 20, 25 of them. And for 3 years, Han and I and Kelly, we worked with these guys with the hope of, because that they had big names and they were, had the credibility, that they could be the future coaches. I think that was your vision.
We brought them in for seminars,
Yes.
a week long or
yes, they were week.
10 days, and either in Canberra, and I remember one time at Valentine Sport Park in Sydney. Yeah, and that was a really good idea. Later, I expanded that because of what I just said. Australia is such a huge country. I managed to get control over the appointment of the technical directors of the state federations. So they started to report to me. I could handpick them. And also together with them, the technical staffs in all these state federations. So at the end, I had a group of, and then I involved the national team coaches and the coaching instructors. And we had a group of somewhere between 70 and 100 people that I start bringing in and took them along the journey of building this curriculum. But of these guys that we brought in, all former internationals, I later appointed them. I appointed the Vidmar brothers for the national teams. I appointed Paul Ocon as a youth national coach. So that became like an oil spot getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
It was just going back to this idea of actually attracting ex-players, I mean, really credible ex-players as teachers was very difficult. It's almost impossible in Europe.
But Alf, over the years, you've worked with some big players, big players from around the world who, if I remember what you've said about them, have said, I wish I'd had Coerver when I was younger. And these are some of the best players in the world. It wasn't typical when they grew up. Right?
Look, for everything, I said Charlie and I began Coerver coaching, but Will was a genius in one way, is that he saw that in 1v1, these great players who were 1v1, that you could actually use their 1v1 skills to actually excite young kids. That was a genius in him, and okay, it changed. Charlie and I have changed that you can't have isolated 1v1. So in the Coerver method's 3 parts. So you repeat something, then you have what's called graduated pressure. So the coach decides the pressure, 7v3 or whatever that pressure might be. Then you have full pressure where the coach got nothing to do with it. In fact, if your coaches are listening, don't even speak. So you've got these 3 stages. And so if you're teaching 1v1, for example, could be a game changer because it creates space. The reason for 1v1, there's a big misunderstanding, is that, not a misunderstanding, we haven't explained it well enough, is that the purpose of 1v1 is to create space to pass, shoot, or run. To create space. It's not about running around people or doing anything. And I think that's where I think Charlie and I sort of left Will and in those 2 second stages, and that's what I demonstrated or asked Han to consider when I showed him the evolution of Coerver coaching. But if I could stick to Australia just for a couple of minutes and mention the Coerver coaching program in Australia, which is run by somebody that Han knows, Jason Lancaster. Jason was a World Cup futsal player, and Jason's almost 20 years we've been working with him, but is now in 7 regions of Australia. More than 10,000 kids every year go to the Coerver schools in Australia. Several of the women's World Cup team, the World Cup was in Australia. I think 4 of the girls were Coerver kids. Several have played for the national team. That's just the top. But I'm more interested in the 10,000 kids that go through the Coerver program in Australia. So I'm really proud of what Jason's done, and not only that, because I think Coerver's good for kids. So it provides them, especially now with I've got 4 grandkids who are always on the iPhone or. Okay, get out and do things, right? And I think Coerver provides that, and it provides, we have 51 countries, but let's stick to Australia. It has provided employment for a lot of coaches to do what they love. Because Han and I were talking in our long lives, we've been lucky. We've done things that we would have done it if people hadn't paid us. I mean, and I think Coerver, especially in Australia, has provided these jobs, and it's not, a lot of competitors of Coerver around the world, and I'm really good. I mean, a lot of professional clubs start soccer schools and camps, but they're basically selling the shirt. I'd like to think that we're selling a way of teaching. I don't know if you agree. I remember you had a lot of applications from soccer schools, and I think once you and I had a conversation, and I think whether it came from you or me was, well, what other people are doing in soccer schools or camps is selling the shirt, and you're selling a teaching way.
100%, and especially in a country like Australia. Look, here in Holland, we're looking out over these fields near the Amsterdam Arena. 5 minutes away from here is another park like this, and 10 minutes away that way is another one. So Holland is a country where every kid becomes a member of the local football club and can train and play there. That's not at all the situation in a country like Australia. So there is a market there for football academies or whatever you want to call them. And then you have any big name club in Europe has a so-called academy in Australia, but it's just selling the shirt, right? And someone who let the kids run around. I've seen sessions there. Well, I couldn't tell if it was a soccer session or a rugby session or an athletic session, because it was just running around the park, and then the last 10 minutes they played a little game. Then you could see, it's a football training. So here, a kid goes as soon as he's 6 years old. He or she goes to become a member of a football club and can play there. But in those countries, there's a lot of opportunities for all these private academies, private schools. But not many really teach them something. No. Right? It's just keeping them busy.
Yes, yeah.
And it's nothing to do with real training.
Or,
right? So in that respect also, Coerver coaching it was a real exception to all these other only money-making exercises without a proper content.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
There is a movement, you see it in European federations, the youth federations, towards not overcoaching young kids.
Yeah.
And so a preference for a game, small-sided games as the teacher. Yeah. So the game is the teacher, not the coach with the method. Yeah. And now you see almost two camps. Yeah. And what's your feeling around that? And we debated internally in Coerver, how do you keep it exciting for the kids? But is the game the teacher, the only teacher?
That is exactly that was exactly the controversy between Michels and Will. Right? And I think, and then Will always said, but how can the game be the teacher if you can't kick the ball or control it or receive it or run with it, right? So I think it's about the balance. And that's why we had all these discussions about only isolated training. I don't believe in it. Only small-sided games. If you don't have any foundation, that doesn't work either. So
you can't teach you, can you?
No,
you can't play properly. No. Yeah.
So that's and that we talked about it already extensively. That's where the change also from within Coerver coaching happened from totally isolated
Yeah.
to game-related, more game-related, more game-specific resistances. And how many of those resistances, that depends on the level of the players. Right?
You know, I always tell coaches when I'm sort of working with them, don't be defensive. If you believe something, then say it, and then we can have a discussion. You know, I know I've just been to Argentina recently, and was talking to them about some of the professional coaches from Boca and River, and talking to them about the validity of a system called parking the bus, where you give up possession and you just hold the last 40 meters, and you might win 1-0 to 0. And they were so angry about, oh, this is not. I'm a Coerver guy, right? I believe in the ball. I'm totally not angry about it. I mean, it's a valid way, as long as it's fair. You know, so I think too many, and I'm not only talking to the Coerver coaches and guys, but whatever you believe, I think you make your case. And so what's the case? What's the link between isolated practice and the team game? Certainly in the Coerver point of view. So say ball mastery is a classic isolated. I do it myself. I repeat things. The brain, that's how the brain learns. So it wires that automatic unconscious skill, whether it's hand movement or writing or piano or football. But then I've got to get it to the team game. So what's the process? So once I repeat something, my brain wires that memory of that skill. And the more I do it and the quicker I do it, that skill becomes more refined. But it's not the team game. So what that ball mastery does is produce some sort of, Will used to call it ball feeling. I don't think he knew what it meant, and I didn't until I met my Dr. Bain some years ago. What that does is when you've got ball feeling, then your game core skills get better. Your passing gets better, your receiving, your running with the ball, your 1v1. So that's the link between ball mastery and skills used in the game. But that's still not enough, because what happens in the game is you've got to make decisions, and to Hans' point at the beginning. So what you need is, I think, in my opinion, the Coerver method, which is a 3-part method. Once you apply the core skills to a 3-part method of teaching, what happens is the speed and quality of the decision-making gets better. So decision-making, what Hans' point was, to all the coaches listening, skill without decision-making is useless in a team game. And then what happens then is that when you've got the speed and quality of decision-making, you may get to what I think it's all about, just my personal opinion, is the understanding of space, the value of space. Because the more space you have, especially with young kids, the less mistakes you're going to make. The less space you have. So it's understanding space. And a good first touch, especially, may give you those seconds. And those seconds then lead you to more options of decision-making. So everything Han described, if I had to describe the evolution of Coerver coaching, that how I laid it out now is how we've evolved. What Will did was stop bang dead in the creation of these beautiful skills. So he had a genius, but but there was no curriculum.
It's a chain reaction. It's observation, decision, execution, and isolated skills stops at execution, right? And the quicker that chain of observation, decision, execution, the quicker you can make that happen, those 3 aspects, the better player you become. Yeah. Because you see all the great players, and we talked a lot about Coerver, but look at nowadays big players. What sets them apart? It always looks as if they have more time. They see things quicker than anyone else. Then also from seeing it to making a decision that also appears to happen quicker than an average player, and then they also have the skills to execute it perfectly. So then it always looks as if they have more time on the ball, or if they have more space, because that whole process.
I think it's beautifully described. You know, I mean, this connection, going back to the value of space. You know, when I watching during COVID years, watching my 4 grandkids play, and I was just tearing my head out. I'm not allowed to speak to them, which is quite right. I'm banned from speaking to my grandkids, which is absolutely the right thing. And I'm also banned from speaking to their coaches. Which is also the right thing to do, especially with me.
I recognize that, Al.
So I got up one morning, like 2:00 in the morning. I was really frustrated. I've just been to one of the boys, Jack's game, and I was thinking, what? There's something every week. I watch these games because COVID. I wasn't working. I was watching the boys play, and 2:00 in the morning. I always have a notebook by my bed, and I thought, what's going wrong? Well, they're panic passing. You know. As soon as somebody runs, even at 20 meters, they're running towards them, they have to pass the ball. So yeah, I call it panic passing. And then they had no clue where to play 1v1. I mean, they just couldn't make that decision. And then with the younger ones, the ones under 10, they were all sort of where the ball was, 5 of them would go. And then they were all calling at the wrong time. So this is also an observation, and I don't know your feelings about it, but this whole thing, when you go to a coaching license and the importance of communication, I understand that, but I don't think it's communication. I think it's where and when that communication happens, which is a decision-making process when you haven't got the ball, because a play with the ball depends on a play without the ball. And so I wrote one word on space. It's about space, right? If I go into space and ask for the ball, that's exactly where I should get it, when I'm in space, not when I'm saying to one of the boys, you're standing next to your teammate and you're asking for the ball or your position. Yeah. If you see somebody there, walk away. Oh, I got in big trouble then because I gave him advice. So I got an email saying never give them advice. But
I tell you one great story, you know, Jan Wouters, who was in the Dutch, he played for Ajax here also. He was in the Dutch 88 team that won the Euros. I had him as a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. He was okay, but never really stood out. If you would have told me then that he would play about 100 times for Holland, you would have brought you to the lunatic asylum. But at one point, Cruyff was coach at Ajax. They bought him from Utrecht to Ajax. Yeah. And everybody, me included, were kind of, surprised. Why would he bring, what does he see in Jan Wouters? And then the kid developed to a top level player. Later on, Jan Wouters said something to me what you actually just said. He said, I used to come asking for balls. The first thing Cruyff taught me is to stay away. Why are you coming to the ball? Yeah, I'm used to come to the ball in support. That's what they've taught me. Stay away. Make space. Make the space for the player on the ball bigger. And you create another situation by taking an opponent away from here and create your bigger space for yourself as well as for the player on the ball.
Yes.
So that links perfectly
with the grandkids. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? You know, all the big clubs and federations I work with, I learnt more watching my grandkids playing.
Alf, let's. You've talked a lot about the history of Coerver, the evolution of Coerver. So bring you up to the present. And Han, you've talked also a lot about the necessity as a developer, as a coach, to have this open mind. The game changes, the world changes, kids change, and we're trying to develop the next generation. So if you look to future football, and the development of the next generation, whether that be top players or just players who love to play. What do you think about the future game? What direction is it going in, and what do we need to think about as developers? Or is football, and football will always be?
Football is football to a certain extent, but
Question.
but you see a lot of cultural changes. Less and less kids go out and play football, right? Less and less they are willing, or their parents are willing, to bring them to training sessions or to organized games. They want to play rather 5-a-side instead of 11v11. They want to play on other moments than necessarily on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon. There's a lot of moving poverage, if I can call it that way. They're there with rather
like FIFA. It's
Yeah,
a good game.
yeah,
I played.
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
a lot of FIFA being played, but not on the pitch.
Yes, yes.
So a lot of that is changing, and also the game at the top is always changing. It's always a matter of, I don't know if the physical boundaries are yet met, or we are close to meeting them with the number of games and the speed of the game. But yeah, there will always be a next development. But I think there's always room for the topic that we are talking about. If you see the top level game, you need players that are athletes. They are all top athletes, but they're all also very, very skillful at every position, right? And it's great to see, we just briefly touched on Guardiola, that there are still so many coaches, because this goes back all the way back to Cruyff and goes back to Will Coerver.
Yes.
That it is still all connected.
Yes, it is.
It's not the same anymore, but it's all still connected. And it's all, the principles of that are still valid nowadays.
I think,
Where will the game lead to in the future? I'm not completely sure, but
yeah, I think that's the fact that you say connected brings something to mind. Do you ever see a film Back to the Future? It was a movie. I think you've described it really well. I think two things. One is that if you look at Back to the Future, and I say this in the context of total football, and again, all credit to the Dutch.
But we hardly ever won something.
No, but you taught the rest of the world how to play, in my opinion, right? Which is a fantastic. That's for me. Yeah. Thank you. But what does that Back to the Future game, Back to the Future mean for me? Is that I think that what will happen is Cruyff's vision of total football and Coerver having a curriculum to develop players that have no number 9, number 7, number 8. They can defend and attack. AI improving the knowledge of what you eat, how you develop. This data, we know nearly everything about tactics. So I don't think that's I think we there's not going to be a huge change in that. So when I say Back to the Future, I think basically it'll be total football again. Let's call it total football, with a curriculum that can develop players to play that. And one part I think Coerver fits in is developing every player, including the goalkeeper, to be able to receive, pass, run with the ball, protect the ball, shoot, and that's that. That's what I see. But there's no doubt that AI will, and I know nothing about this, not my specialty at all. I'm dumb in it. But AI will show you, how to select players. What's the criteria, the DNA of the player you want? It'll identify it quicker. It'll tell them, what their diets are, what they should eat. In other words, all this expertise about the physical side The tactical side, AI will help. On the technical side, like Han said, you're still going to have to receive the ball. You're still going to have to pass the ball. You're still going to have to protect the ball. On the mental side, I think the DNA of your practice. So when you go to drill library and you pick a practice, you can't have a practice without some decision making and some competition. If you were making a dish, spaghetti with olive oil and garlic, that sort of that's got to be the DNA of the future practice, the future session you do. And for players under 12, I think there's only one thing that I would certainly, and I'd be interested in if Han agrees, is your sessions have to be enjoyable, because love is a fuel for carrying on the game, especially when there's all these other, they've got all these other distractions. For any young coach or any coach who works with boys and girls who are younger, the drills and games that are the most fun, I'm not saying chaos, because competition is also fun for me, is once they love the game, they'll stay in the game. So if they love the game, they'll practice more. If they practice more, they'll get better. If they get better, they'll have more confidence, and they'll love the game more. It's all about love.
You have to create a passion for the game in young kids, because they have so many other options.
Different,
Right? Yeah. And one of the things that is interesting, very close by, is AZ, Alkmaar, Youth Academy. It's rather in Amsterdam than in Alkmaar, isn't it? Yeah. You know better right now. Yeah. Huh? They do a lot with, talent recognition. They do a lot with how well and how quick do young kids learn, and how quick and how well do they adapt to new situations. So you just mentioned the word chaos. There is a lot of chaotic situations in the game, and they follow up really quickly. You have the ball, you lose it. You have the ball, you lose it. It's transitioning all the time.
Yeah, turnovers.
And adapting to a new situation all the time. So what they do at AZ a lot is not necessarily look at the talent in skills, right? But I look in the talent of quickly learning and the ability of quickly adapting to changing situations. Because their research shows that the better a young kid is at that, in the end, the biggest chance there is that they will reach the top of the modern game. So that's also something to think
game
about.
Intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Game intelligence.
That's a good point, Rainel, game intelligence. I had a podcast with, I think it was with Dr. Bain, about this topic called emotional intelligence. And to Hans' point, I also, when I had the podcast with Arsene Wenger and with Gerard Houdin and Roy Hodgson and people like that who've been in the game a long time, we're all scratching ourselves. Why do so many few kids become pros? You've got this kid who's great at 12 and then out the game by 17, 16, and even worse between 16 and 24, huge dropout. And so it can't be the skills, because they wouldn't be at a pro club if they were skillful. If they weren't skillful. It can't be the tactics. They're professional coaches. They've all got their pro license. It can't be physical, because every pro club's got 15 scientists. There's only one component left, which I'd like to learn more about, and that's the mental component. This is where I think all the licenses, globally, is an area that we coaches don't understand enough about. And one aspect of it, and I think it was even Arsene that raised it, was this question called emotional intelligence. And what that basically means is seeing losing as a motivation, seeing mistakes as a motivation, seeing being injured, you're motivated to recover.
That's
And-
a growth mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
Growth
that,
mindset.
That wonderful book.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was called the growth. But just while I think about it, when I was in Argentina, I was speaking to Messi's coach, longtime coach, and he was saying that resilience. Because I'm so interested in Messi. How was he when he was 17, 18? He said this kid he made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. This idea, when we were in Japan, they actually encourage mistakes because they think you learn from it, and I believe that. But he was talking about Messi, and he was saying, injured, I've got to get better. Lose 5-0, I'm going to win the next game. That mindset, so important.
I think what sets all big performers apart is that they all have a growth mindset, because if things don't go the way you want them to go, you basically can have two reactions.
Yeah.
So the ones with a fixed mindset, they react like, this is too difficult, I'm never going to learn this, and they quit. And the ones with a growth mindset, they say, I have to train harder or do more to get better at this. And all big performers, not only in sports, turn out to have a growth mindset. They get better from failure.
Yes.
They see failure gives them the fuel to develop and step up and get better again.
I think that's a great way to describe it. That energy that mistakes gives you is a positive energy. And most of us, maybe it's how we built or react to disappointment not well.
It's also a big lesson for both coaches and parents, because if you don't react the right way on something, if a kid fails to do something properly or he can't do it yet, both as a coach or a teacher or as a parent, if you have the wrong reaction, the kid will automatically develop a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to try this anymore because I'm not good enough. I will never learn this. And on the other hand, if you have the right reaction, say, that's no problem. You have to train harder or try again.
They see it as a motivation.
Yeah. You can also, you're not born with a growth or a fixed mindset. No. It's being put upon you by the way your environment reacts to you. Right?
Yeah.
And it's the same when a kid always gets praised. You're the best. You're so good. And then in football, the higher you get, the bigger the resistance gets. You get with better players in a stronger team against stronger opponents. And if only everyone has always told you that you're so good, suddenly it turns out you're not so good anymore because the rest is better. Then if you then have developed a fixed mindset, you stop.
Yeah.
Your development stops.
Yeah.
Right? So that is a very important lesson for coaches as well.
Good. Yeah, Rainel, you've worked with hundreds of players.
Yeah.
Right, over 10 years of Coerver Coaching Netherlands. Yeah. So on that theme of growth mindset, or what the teaching and learning of football can bring to a kid in the bigger sense, both within the game and outside the game, what have you seen? And what is the way of coaching that you think supports young players in the game?
Yeah, just explaining that it's allowed to make mistakes. And to my coaches, it's more like you're not the coach, you're the entertainer. So once you're the entertainer, then it's like still a motivation for the coach and the player. So that's the way I'm educating my coaches to say, okay, we don't lose, we learn if we lose. And it's hard to understand for the kids, but what will you take back when you lose a game? What are the benefits that you will take to the next game?
How do you explain that to the parents, Rainel?
Well, it's
difficult,
hard,
right?
It's hard to explain that to parents, especially they come once a week within our academy, and parents they have something like, we're bringing our kids to Coerver to develop them, and then hopefully they get a chance to get at a pro club. But to get them really in the Coerver mindset, it's quite difficult.
Do the parents? So how do they? Do you think you could make a case that getting better is winning? In other words, redefine the word winning. And, I'm talking about kids between 8 and 16.
Yeah.
So that the score is one way, 2-0, 3-0. That's one way to win.
Yeah.
But maybe to the parents, when you have, I know you have parents' evenings. So that's one of the fantastic things you do right now. For I think it's so good to speak to the parents regularly. But actually say, well, yes, winning is a score, but winning is also your kid. Because I'm thinking about my grandkids. Yeah. Honestly, I'm being honest. I don't care if they lose 5-0. If Jack or Jesse or Harry or Joe get better, that's
Yeah.
I wonder if we could make that case to parents.
I think it's possible. I mean, the thing is, where and when will you speak about it? I mean, we see these kids only one time a week, so I don't think it's something to us. But we have the understanding, and probably we should bring it back to our partner clubs where we do certain sessions or seminars with coaches, and then try to influence the coaches in this mindset. I mean, winning to me is if a kid cannot move the ball and he can move the ball. That's winning already for me. Like you said, it's not about scoring, but developing. So that's what I explain when I have these parental meetings, and
I think it's great.
That's the development.
It's still a lot. If you look at, if you watch the youth games, still a lot of shouting and going on, and parents
Focused on winning.
Parents want the kids to win. If you look at an under-8 game, and the kids don't care. They're a bit disappointed when they lose, but 5 minutes later they're playing again. But the parents go crazy.
Why is that, Han, do you think? Or is that too complex cultural influence question?
Well, it's all around the world. It was even worse in Australia, where this winning at all cost mentality. There was a system, I tell you, in Australia when I just started, where promotion and relegation of these amateur clubs was decided on a total point system throughout the club. So at a certain point there were
different teams.
Yes, and then the first team counted times 10, but even the under 12s, when the club was about to relegate, so it was not just one team that could get relegated; the whole club got relegated. So then it would depend on the result of an under 12.
Of a 12-year, yeah.
Now, can you imagine what sort of situations that brought about? But I think a lot of parents, they want their kid to do what they were not able to achieve. And that leads to those ridiculous situations you sometimes see at the touchline of a youth game.
Just before we wrap up, Han, you're in Australia, obviously, with the Women's World Cup was there, and what an amazing event. Can you just talk a little bit about women's football, the growth of women's football here in the Netherlands? I think has always been a leader in women's football, and where that's going in the future, and the role that we can play as developers.
Well, to answer that last question, I think a big role, and it would surprise me if you not notice already that many more girls are entering your sessions, and so here in Holland, the big growth is in women's football, and by the way, the Dutch team plays tonight. But so the number of new memberships in football are for 90% girls in the women's game. The World Cup has given an even bigger boost to women's football in Australia. And in Australia, it was quite big already. Bigger than in a lot of European countries. But now it's really huge. And you see that by the number of spectators at the games. The Matildas, the Australian national women's team, those games are sold out. People really went crazy after the World Cup, and they are one of the potential winners they see themselves for the upcoming Olympics. So it's massive. Before the World Cup, we had maybe 300-400 spectators at the Sydney FC women's games, because we also have a professional women's team. We have now an average of 7,000.
Wow.
It's becoming a business unit in itself. And we've just sold 1 or 2 female players for a transfer fee. It's still not comparable to the amounts in the men's game, but I think the big potential, growth potential, is on the women's side of the game globally, I think.
Now, Finn, that's part of Coerver Coaching's history, long history, I think, with
so.
women's football.
Yeah, I mean, the first, so I think back in the late 80s, we started in America, because US has been a leader in, I think, in women's soccer, in women's football. And we Coerver Coaching, we started in one of our camps in the US in the late 80s, just for girls, a program. So Coerver's been involved with girls soccer for a long time. But one of the girls that was an original Coerver kid back in those days, a girl called Christine Lilly. Now, Christine's won 2 World Cups, 2 Olympic golds, and she's the Coerver women's ambassador and Coerver coach now. And so, and we did a podcast recently, like with Han, with her, about women's football. She's a mother, 2 teenage kids now. But I've noticed now my granddaughter. So when you see members of your own family going into you think something's happening. Also, my most experience, as well as working in the US, I worked in Japan in women's football. And the last World Cup, we had 4 Coerver kids in the team that beat Spain 4-0. And Spain won the World Cup. So I'm like Han. There's still this sexism, I think, that, it's a men's game, etc., from certain quarters. But from certainly Han and myself, I think we're big believers. Yeah.
Is the curriculum different?
That's a good question. So under 12, it's not different. Under 12 is still the game core skills, running the ball, 1v1, passing, all the skills that you need to play the team game well. But as far as I understand it, the explanation from my doctor friend, when things start happening for the boys and girls, but between 13 and 16, boys physically, not that girls can't play with them, but it's probably physically it's difficult. Yeah. So therefore the drill session, the sessions and the drill DNA may have to change. The physicality of it, maybe to take care of that physical aspect. Regarding the technical aspect, I don't think so. I think I can't think of a technical adjustment to teaching boys or girls, up to 21. I can't think of a technical shoot. I mean, I hear some of my German colleagues say, well, girls tend to shoot from longer range and their shots are not so powerful, but that's got a physical component in it.
There's a lot of ACL injuries in women's football as well. Yeah. Could there be a connection? Or?
So I spoke to a friend. So ACL is protects your knee, basically, for people who it's part of the knee. And there is absolutely conclusive data that girls suffer this injury much more. Yeah. I did speak to a friend of mine, Dr. Stoyan, in the US. Now, it could be your quad muscles protect your knee, and whether the boys or girls develop in a different way, he's not sure. As far as I know, and again, please, if I'm not an expert, you can look it up in Google, etc. If there is a distinctive reason for this, but it is happening. You're absolutely right. I think it's like 3 to 1. Yeah, one injury for a boy is 3.
There's a lot of research going on. There isn't
conclusive.
There's not a conclusive answer yet.
I mean, we have some girls, Coerver girls, who are playing now at, for example, AZ Alkmaar. And what we do, where we start our drills, is always with the ball mastery. So we're already working with that coordination, making the little muscles
You
a
mean
little
the
bit
coordination of the knee?
Flexibility, and
So that's what I believe. That okay, if we do those ball mastery movements, it could make it a little bit more flexible, a little bit stronger.
You mean physical benefit?
Physical benefit,
rather than technical,
and also introducing like yoga movements, you know, stretching, dynamic stretching, which could help maybe, but I'm not sure. But something where I believe that the technical part, which is the ball mastery, and then a little bit flexibility movements.
Further to Hans' question, the difference between coaching boys and girls, from my just personal experience and what I've seen, and I don't mean to be take one side, it is just personal view. I much more enjoy coaching girls often. They're more focused sometimes. This is a huge generalization, but they're focused. They, get on better together. Seem to get on better together. There's not this sort of splitting. I just find them a kind of a pleasure to work with as far as their focus. Have you found that, or is it just
no,
my
that's,
experience?
That's true. I have the same experience. They're more open to learn, and like the guys, they know it all. They know it all, But the girls, they're more open to learn, and you have some girls who would like to compete against guys. So we don't separate. We don't do just for girls programs. We do. When you come with us, it's mixed.
Yes.
And I had some girls, even girls who are now almost at the pro level. We have Eliza Kruijzer from FC Utrecht, for example. She's in the first woman league from FC Utrecht. And she was within our academy. Last summer, I did even some personal session with her. But if you see the development, they are more open and more eager to learn. And they pick it up, to me, more faster. Yeah.
I think girls do mature intellectually, don't they?
Yes,
quicker.
mentally they mature.
I remember with your interview with Christine Lilly,
Yeah.
when you talked to her about girls, the differences, and she said, there's not many. We teach football, football's football. But she said, the one thing that I do like the Coerver method is, because you have this thing about 1v1, which means you have a choice. You either pass or you have 1v1, go for it. And a lot of girls don't go for it because they're looking
they're
to be nice. They're looking to bring their teammates in.
Yes.
And she said, we have to learn a little bit more to go it alone. But she said, that's what fundamentally the Coerver method is. You have two choices. You either pass or you'll go alone if that's the best decision, or you have to, or you've nobody to pass to. And she said that's what can take the girls' game to the next level. Does that resonate?
Girls and women are more social, I think.
Yeah.
So,
and boys and men are more.
Yeah.
It's about me, and I want to be
stronger, faster.
Look, so I think we're getting to the end of the amazing discussion. So I would describe, because I'm allowed to, I would describe you as two warriors in the careers of development of football and all the things you've done and the places you've been, the people you've worked with. And you have this deep love of the game, which is fundamental, right?
That's the fundament of it.
If you don't love this, coaching is not an easy thing.
No.
But if you love it and you love the kids or the players in front of you, you've always said that, Alf, that love of the game. But that comes from having a method, an opinion, a way. Is that right? Where does that love come from for a coach?
Yeah.
Or where did it come from for you? Maybe a better question.
I mean, just my huge respect for Han. I think you go through life and you meet people and you get on with some, you don't get on with some. But in the end, if you're talking about a profession, because we're both professionals, you know who's speaking without content and who's through their experience. I think the commonality between us is we've got so much experience. I'm not saying it's always right and it's always good, but we have that experience. And the fact that we've got mutual respect, there's nothing for us to defend. I don't have to be defensive, or he doesn't have to be defensive. I have opinion, he has an opinion. I respect that. I think that that's a huge thing. This mutual respect.
It's two grey warriors, and
and not giving up. Obviously, not giving up, right?
but
it's not giving up.
Because it's your passion, and I owe everything to the game, right? So then you also have to give back to the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is your life. This is what you love. That is why we are still in it.
Yeah.
That is why we are not the kind of people that count down the days till we can retire. We can't retire because we never worked. They always paid us for something we would have done for free anyway.
So if you're giving some, sorry, Alf. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying is that. So we've done all these podcasts, Mike, and I said to you before, not because it's here. This is the one. Han represents a way of teaching of the game that changed how the game was taught and viewed. That aesthetic, like Arsene was saying. It's also good to see beautiful football, like Pele said, the beautiful game. And I think that's what in Coerver coaching, we realised years ago, Charlie and I, that there was an aesthetic quality. There is some beauty in the movement. I know it's a team and competitive game and competition you want to win, but there is another side of it, and I think that's one thing that if there's a legacy at all, I think that what we've done is build a curriculum and a method that has changed how people teach the game. I don't know, I mean, going to Argentina, going to Brazil, going to 51, pro clubs, I've seen how they've taken what we've been doing and use it in different ways, but they're using it. So I do think if there's a legacy to Coerver coaching, it's that it has changed how people teach.
Han, would you agree with that in looking to the future?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
if you're a coach, a young coach, looking for a curriculum, a way forward, the Coerver coaching approach, which came from the Dutch football revolution, is a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've basically touched on all the whys that is, right? Because in the end of the day, what everyone wants to see is these decisive players, the special players on the pitch that can change games,
Creative and
create special situations, right? That's what everyone wants to see, and for that, again, we're starting to repeat ourselves, but Coerver coaching for that is an ideal teaching method.